Hello, welcome back to Dukascopy TV. My name's Thomas Taplin. Now, we're perhaps used to seeing high energy prices as oil and gasoline take hold in major countries such as China. But oil is on a 4-month drop at the moment, with a 3.2% decrease after the recent elections where Sarkozy was ousted by socialist Francois Hollande. Added to that, a decrease slowly over the last few months of natural gas prices. Well, joining us in the studio today is John Hancock, Counsellor at the World Trade Organization. John, thanks for coming in the studio today.
Thanks for having me.
We've seen a number of key events affect energy prices in recent months, most recently the French election. What else is helping to push down these prices?
I think there's probably a number of interrelated factors. I mean, you're absolutely right to focus on what's happening in Europe and questions about the European growth trajectory. There's uncertainty in China at the moment. The signs of a U.S. recovery are looking more tentative right now. So on the demand side, there are concerns that what looked like a across-the-board global recovery is less certain than it was 4 months ago, and that's infected the price of oil and the outlook for oil. At the same time, there's lots of interesting things going on the supply side, and I think in the long term, that's probably more significant.
And as you can see from the graph here behind us, we've seen a steady decline in natural gases. Is this something to do with the overproduction of natural gases? I mean, I know that in the US they've been producing heavy amounts of this.
Well, it's fascinating. There's actually a fascinating revolution going on in the US right now, but it's now extending to other countries. Supplies of natural gas, oil, copper, zinc, etc. are finite, and with rising global demand, those finite supplies will collide with the demand and prices will go up. What we're seeing, though, is the consistent inability of people to imagine that technology almost inevitably outpaces scarcity. You have this paradox in a way that rising prices, the kind of price rises we saw after 2000 and before, almost inevitably create their inevitable decline. As prices rise, there's greater incentives to invest in exploration, in new technologies, in new refining capacity, in new transportation capacity. That's happened. And in the case of the United States and natural gas, this famous or infamous hydraulic fracturing technology, or fracking, had suddenly turned the U.S. from one of the greatest global importers of natural gas to a natural gas exporter in less than a decade. It's remarkable.
Going on to my next question, US crude oil has been trading below $100 of late as suppliers, as we mentioned earlier, increase production. The US are exporting more gasoline since perhaps the late 40s and 50s. Where is this sudden surge coming from and why?
In the United States, the oil sector is going through the same revolution as the natural gas sector. Oil fields which were producing nothing in Kansas now are producing 500,000 barrels a day. Texas, the same events are occurring. There was a recent Citigroup report that predicted that the United States by 2020 could be among the world's top oil producers.
Well, I mean, I've heard some have been describing it as the new Middle East, if you like.
The new Middle East.
Yeah. I mean, it's interestingly, sticking with obviously the US and Barack Obama, his pledge in 2008 was essentially to say, well, I'm going to introduce perhaps more greener ways of producing energy, but obviously this is we're suddenly seeing he's maybe going against all this, and suddenly we're seeing an untapped source in the US. Is that sort of a slight anomaly? Or?
Yeah, that's an interesting point you make. I mean, in a way, he was focusing on essentially curtailing demand. How can we reduce America's energy consumption, both, I think, to meet his their broader environmental targets, but also their geopolitical problems. I mean, this huge vulnerability to the Middle East and to the trouble spots of the world. But the irony, and as you pointed out, is that it's not shrinking demand that's been his best friend. It's in fact growing demand that's been his best friend. That growing demand has raised prices. Price rises have increased incentives to do all these things we talked about, which has created a surge in supply. So it may well be that Barack Obama's dream of an energy self-sufficient United States comes about. but it won't be the route that he foresaw in 2008.
John, some fascinating stuff there. Thanks very much for coming into the studio again.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that's it, all we've got time for on Dukascopy TV, but stick with us throughout the day as we bring you the latest updates. But for now, goodbye.